if you are treating it as a growth approach or like through the product-led growth motion, you can evaluate if this particular feature or this particular solution will give your business the money you want to get. And I think for a startup or any business, when you start asking yourself these questions, this is probably the moment when you need to explore and need to build a growth team.
Hi guys, welcome to the Growth Design Podcast, where you get to learn about growth design and its principles through experienced product leaders and growth experts, and how they have implemented growth design in building successful products and also building great companies. In today's section, my guest is Kate Syuma, current head of growth design at Miro. In today's section, we discuss at length how to build a high-performing growth design team and how she has managed to build the growth team at Miro. She also gave a lot of advice on how a growth designer should work cross-functionally in a team and how a growth design team also works cross-functionally in a company. She also gave some insight on best practices to build better onboarding for your customer. Hi Kate, happy to have you on the show.
Hi everyone, thanks for having me today. Happy to meet you as well and happy to share my story. Hope it will be useful.
Amazing. So, Kate, before we dive deep into the conversation, I did a little bit of research about you, and I must say that your story is fantastic and really inspiring, especially how you got into Miro. For folks who might not know much about you, can you tell us about your incredible journey from being an entry-level designer to being the head of growth design at Miro?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely been a journey. I think in a nutshell, I started my journey in design like maybe around 9 years ago when I was exploring what I want to do. So I started with graphic design and transitioned to UX design. And then actually the opportunity found me and I said yes. So I was pretty worried about this first step in my like serious career in the company, like real-time board. It was pretty good startup this time, and I joined the company as a third product designer and employee number 63rd. And my journey at Miro, I would divide it into 3 chapters. And I think the first one was like when I joined the company as a product designer, when I was hands-on working in different streams like enterprise, growth, which is pretty crazy combination, I would say. And second chapter was when I actually uncovered that growth is my passion. And I was the first designer, as I mentioned, in growth team. And we started building that as a stream. So I started covering more and more domains inside growth, like acquisition, activation, engagement. And also I started building the discipline of user research because we didn't have the user research that time, but we have had our lab team, like R&D team, and I was researcher there. So I was 50-50, like product designer and user researcher. And then the third chapter, which is still happening, I think, was when I transitioned from IC to management. It happened when COVID happened, I think, because we started scaling very fast. We had to build the team, and I was like one designer for 4 teams, which wasn't sustainable. And I started building the team over 1 year. I scaled the team from 1 designer to 5 designers. And now I'm leading the team of 10 designers, product designers, and 1 content designer, and also looking for a manager to scale it even further.
Wow, amazing. Like I said, that's quite inspiring for me. And, it's some sort of what I look forward to be kind of my journey also in the field of growth. So looking at your current role as the head of growth design and being an IC designer, so what would you say is the difference between growth design and product design?
Oh, this is a fantastic question. I love it. I would say if you would ask me this question maybe 3 years ago or 4 years ago when growth design discipline was quite like new and emerging, I would say like there are 10 differences, like many differences. However, today I think growth design and product design should be more united rather than like divided. Because growth design, as I define it, is like a discipline as like 5x designer. So it combines product design, user research, data analysis, prioritization of impact, speed of execution, and iterative approach. So there are many components of the growth design and one of them is product design, right? So without a good product design oriented towards the quality, UX, UI, and things like we know about product design, there is no good growth design, in my opinion. But interesting additions to growth design are this data-informed approach that is super powerful. So you are not like focused just on user needs. You are also focused on the business goals, and you are trying to connect whatever you are trying to create with end result and with impact. And you are trying to extract these hypotheses through data that you have. You are trying to validate your assumptions faster. So these are the components that make it a little bit different. However, at Miro, we are also trying to introduce this approach in our core teams, for example, where we have like focus on consistency and things like that. So this is why I'm saying today I would like to have more friendship between product design and growth design.
Yeah, amazing. There was something you talked about that really kind of blew my mind, and I think I'm hearing that for the first time. You said a growth designer is a 5x product designer. So I really like that. Definitely, I've got quite speakers, a lot of speakers that really think growth design and product design are sort of the same thing, but very, very similar, but quite different also. Looking at a growth designer as a specialist, right? So what do you think, or how do you think a growth designer best function in a team that is quite different from a product designer?
So if you ask me about how growth designers should function in a cross-functional team, right? So with the partnership like product manager and other partners, I would say, in my experience, in growth teams, which are also cross-functional teams, which are product teams, where we have product manager, engineers. We also have two additional roles that are super important for growth teams, like data analyst and product marketing manager. And the partnership of growth designer is important with product manager, data analyst in the first place, because this is exactly where this discovery part of the work is happening. So how you extract inputs through your product manager, how you extract data through your data analyst, how do you ask questions to data, what are the good questions that will give you good data, and all of these things. So I think the power of growth designer in these teams is to come up with very high quality questions, to extract high quality inputs, and then you can apply them to design. And this is the difference. So we are not starting with maybe like vision exploration. We are not opening Figma right away and trying to explore best in class product design solution for the problem. We are trying to collect as much data, as much existing facts, needs that we have. So then we can iterate faster and come up with some variations like A, B, C, D versions for this solution, maybe validate it with customers through some unmoderated user testing to move faster, and then launch this test and also extract learnings. So what also I think is powerful for growth designers to drive in the team is this learning culture. So for example, at Miro, whenever you get the experiments results, some of our growth designers actually introduced this framework, which is called quiz, experiments quiz. And whenever you get the result of like A, B, C experiment, you are trying to educate the team what actually happened. And you have this quiz when you show your team these versions, what was the control, what was A, what was B, and then you hide the actual results and you are asking them, what do you think, which variation is the winner? And they assume and they explain why, and then you reveal the results, and it's surprising because it's not what you expect. And we do that with our growth team, and designers also are doing this with their cross-functional team, like with engineers, for example. Can you imagine like engineers looking at the results and they assume, and then they see the results and they are so engaged, and then they treat their work even differently because they see the impact, they see why behind that, and they also inform the iterations because they help the designer to come up with the next iteration.
Yeah, I think that's really genius for me, because looking at how growth design or a growth designer works cross functionally, and having to sort of present and try to convince why you should do sort of some experiment, and the back and forth when you are working within a team. I think I like the approach of the experimental quiz, which I think I also will actually still and so sort of had to my team, by the way. So I sort of like that approach, and I think it's one of the way to really win, not sort of win, but just to be able to make people see the perspective of really experimenting and sort of iterating, not just going with just one idea, and see how each of them really performs better. One of the things I learned about you was that there was this quote when I was sort of reading about you, that you talked that there, there are so many ways a designer can grow. So leads me to my next question. And how do you think a growth designer can grow? Looks like tautology, but how does a growth designer grow
Wow, this is
as a creative and in a company?
absolutely. This is a great question. I have never thought about that, to be honest. I thought exactly that is so natural. Like, growth designer is growing all the time. However, this is a pretty interesting question to tackle for me today because in a company like Miro at this scale, especially with the focus on the velocity, for example, sometimes we are not maybe paying as much attention as I would like to pay to the in depth quality or in depth strategic design activities. And this is exactly how traditionally designers are growing, right? So, like, if you are a product designer, then you are growing to a senior product designer, to a lead staff designer by tackling more strategic, more like huge projects, holistic end-to-end projects. However, in growth, we are usually working with a little bit different approach. And how I found the opportunity for that, for my team in particular, is sometimes, not sometimes, regularly each quarter, we are trying to identify a big bet. And this big bet is the project where we can be more in depth, more holistic. So, for example, last quarter, we tackled onboarding vision with one of my designers in the team, and it was an opportunity for a designer also to, calm down a little bit from this like ongoing experimentation and fast pace, and dive deeper into like what we already know, what we need to change because we experimented so much and we need to do some cleaning exercise. What are the problems we need to connect, and what is the mission of the company, how we need to connect all of these dots. And I think giving each designer this opportunity for each quarter to focus on like one big bet and in parallel doing many like quick wins is something that I find like as a balance or some combination that for designer is also quite inspiring, because like you wanna have a bigger impact, and to have a bigger impact you probably need to sit down and think a bit deeper. And through that, actually the journey or the growth path looks pretty natural if we compare, or like right now we calibrate in performance review designers like in different streams. However, for growth designers, I think there is even more flexibility and opportunity to grow. Some designers want to dive into data even more. So to become like nerds and like understand data and be hands-on with data. So for them, we're also trying to provide this opportunity. Some designers want to dive into user research and be like user-centric customer evangelist, and we are trying to provide this opportunity as well. Some designers in growth, they are pretty business-oriented thinkers, and for them, we are trying to create opportunity to think as a product manager would think in the company. So I think this ability to be like, like super diverse specialist, like as I mentioned, 5x designer, gives you the opportunity to grow in any of these fields. And at some point you can even switch to one of these fields because you already have some basic knowledge, for example, in data analysis or in user research. So we had like situation in my team when designers switched to user research. So like it can happen. And I think it's also great to provide this variability of your growth paths.
Yeah, absolutely. I also like something you mentioned there. You talked about specialty diversity. As first, when you're a growth designer, you are a specialist. And I also like the fact that you talked about being able to diverse into different aspects of, growth, talking about trying to dive deep into maybe being a customer evangelist, that's knowing so much about the customers, user research, diving deep into being a data nerd. I think these are really great way of growing as a growth designer. Absolutely. But there's another the part B of the question, which is how do you grow in a company as a growth designer?
Yeah, I think to make it maybe more specific, I can share my example. Yeah, so how it happened with me, and I think it can be practical for a broader audience because Miro was a startup, then it's scaled, so maybe I can cover it in different stages of the company, of different sizes of the company, because the growth path, if you join a company of the scale like 5,000 people, is different from the scale of 50 people when I joined it. If you join, or if you are working in a like startup or like scale up or like growing company of a size of maybe 50 people or 100, if you start as a product designer, you have freedom of choosing whatever you want. You maybe don't even have the career map or all of these expectations, so you have this freedom to actually build your career path by yourself. So maybe this is what happened with me. So I was a product designer, we didn't have any career map or any grade system, but I was like super eager to learn, to grow, and just to try new things. So basically, if you start as a product designer and you have this growth mindset, which is super powerful, you can uncover new opportunities. So for example, if you see that nobody is tackling some problem area, or like, I don't know, for example, dashboard, and you want to redesign it, you can pitch it to your manager, you can create the program project for that, you can start leading that project. And after some time, when you become autonomous on that, you can take even more projects like that, start leading them, and over time you can grow like and become a lead designer. For example, you are still hands-on, you are doing your best and uncovering new opportunities, people value you. And at some point you need to understand if you want to do more hands-on work or you want to lead the team. And this is probably a conversation or topic for another podcast, is like IC to manager transition, how to make these decisions, what kind of questions you need to ask yourself, because this is quite a serious shift, I would say. It's not just like, okay, now I will start building a team and will lead a team. It's super different type of work, and you need to be very intentional about that. However, you can try. As a growth designer, you can try whatever you want. You can treat it as an experiment. So for example, I treated my transition to manager as an experiment. We designed with my manager 6 months plan and we identified success criteria, how you do that for any experiment. And after this period of time, it was a long experiment. It was obvious for me that, yeah, this is what I want to do. So yeah, and then, so for example, if you make this decision, if you make this transition, you grow in a different way. You are growing your team, you are trying to think of them as like your asset, and your success is measured by success of your team. And this is a different type of mental model maybe for you to adapt if you want to go to managerial path. However, yeah, I believe like in the company of that scale and with this hyper growth path, there were plenty of opportunities to do new things. As I've mentioned, for example, user research. There was no user research. And for you as a designer today, it's like probably obvious that we need to do some user research. And if you are not doing it in your small company right now, you can start introducing this as a discipline. And maybe at some point you can become, I don't know, the head of user research. So it's up to you. I think it's in your hands. Your career is in your hands. And even in a big company, I would say it's still the need. As a designer or as an individual contributor, you have this responsibility to advocate for yourself, to grow your career path, to design your career path by yourself, rather than waiting when a manager will come to you and tell you where to move forward.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I think that's sort of profound. Some of the two things one of the two things I sort of cap out there is that we talked about the product leadership, like able to sort of look at a particular loophole or sort of like an opportunity and try to dive deep into that and try to take initiatives and also product initiatives, like what you just said now, looking at an aspect of your company, if even if it's a big company or a small company, you're able to take initiatives, doing research and everything. And I think, yeah, that's a really valid way to sort of grow as a growth designer. Thanks so much for that. So, diving deep into the conversation, recently we've seen that growth design is becoming emerging in companies. A lot of companies are now investing so much in growth. That's the reason why we now see companies having a separate growth design team, apart from the core product team. So I want you to kind of tell us from your experience, why do you think having a growth team as a startup or a company is essential?
Yeah, this is a great question. I think I'm probably very biased here, but I believe almost any business, any SaaS company that decides to do something like product-led growth type of model need to have a growth team in order to be successful or in order to earn some money, because typically like product teams, they have a little bit different mentality. Like they are more focused on particular feature requests. Especially in the very beginning, I hear so much from startups, like they are gathering feature requests, they are creating these features. However, if you are treating it as a growth approach or like through the product-led growth motion, you can evaluate if this particular feature or this particular solution will give your business the money you want to get. And I think for a startup or any business, when you start asking yourself these questions, this is probably the moment when you need to explore and need to build a growth team. And growth team doesn't start from like a team, right? So it starts probably from one person, from one individual who knows what is that. It can be a person from a like product management background or design background or data background who can start like introducing that discipline into the company. And it can happen when you are validating your product market fit or when you are trying to choose a business model, because if you don't know like what it should be, trial based, freemium based, like you're like stuck. And it can be a moment when you can attract someone to help you, or even at the moment if you already validated what your business needs and you just don't know where to move forward and how to build this model when you generate your revenue through the product itself, not through sales only. This is a product-led growth, right? So then it's also the moment when you can introduce someone who knows how to do that. And yeah, right now I would say the solution not maybe to start growth team right away. There are multiple people who can advise on that topic first, right? So to talk to you and to suggest you what to do, like for example, people like me or some of my ex-colleagues, we are all doing this type of advising, and we can support startups and help them understand what they need to do if they need a growth team or they need to do something else.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for that. It's absolutely inevitable for any team that wants to grow not to sort of have a growth team, definitely at any sort of level it is. So as a growth lead, as a growth design lead at Miro, so what has been the journey, starting a team from scratch for you?
Yeah, that's nice probably moment to reflect on that. I think if we maybe look back 4 or 5 years ago when we started like a growth team, 5 years ago I think, overall we started first our growth team, and then after maybe 2 or 3 years I started my growth design team. So there are two stories. So starting the growth team was exciting because we started just a small cross-functional team. We had just one product manager, I was a designer, we had maybe 4 or 5 engineers, no, four I think, not so many. And we were working across the whole funnel, like acquisition, activation, engagement, retention, monetization, experimenting like with so many things, running like dozens of experiments each quarter, learning fast, moving super fast. It was super nice moment of like a first couple of years. And then as we proved that product-led growth is something like we want to invest in as a company, we started building a stream. And this was the moment when I started building my team, because for a stream you cannot be just one designer. So when we started building this stream and I started building my team, we started from some potential org structure that is connected to our vision of like 1 year ahead, at least 1 year ahead. And we created this like idea, what will be the teams, who do we have, who we need. And I started looking for people for particular needs, for particular new disciplines. So for example, we opened the position for acquisition, and I knew like for this position we need some person who is flexible in terms of moving fast. However, for me, like the quality itself was also super important, and it was probably my first hire to my team. And I remember that time I was like looking for some person who was experienced in growth design as well, because I was experienced in growth design. We need someone who also knows like what is growth design discipline. But the market that time, it was more than 3 years ago. It was about 2 or 3 years ago. The market at that time was not that big in terms of growth design specialists. It's still like not so big. Or a lot of people who are growth designers were in US and we are hiring for in Europe. So it was very hard to find the person who has experience in growth design. And that first hire who we attracted, he didn't have growth design experience, and he had experience in startups and growth mindset, by the way. And I think pretty good like flexibility and visual craft. So we made a decision to move forward. And right now, this person is one of our like growth design evangelists, because over a year he learned so much, probably as you do, right? So you're so passionate about that, about growth. And now he's like one of the person who actually introduced this quiz format. So Oscar, hey. So this is, I think, powerful to connect your business needs to particular profiles and find unobvious decisions, because yeah, ideally you probably could attract like growth designer, but it would take a lot of time maybe. However, for the first time when you are growing a team, you need to be creative. You need to be like, you need to look deeper, finding the people who you really need, finding culture fit for sure. And then for these first five designers, or right now 10 designers, making this team diverse in terms of culture, in terms of mindset, in terms of skill set. We don't need all growth designers, like all these type of 5x designers in our team. So in my team, we have like so different people. Some of them are more into user research, some of them more into visual craft. Some of them are pure like growth designers, these type of 5x designers who are super like diverse. So we need this diversity in the team to make it successful. And from the very beginning, if you start building that team, think about that also in the first place.
Yeah, amazing. Amazing. So let's dive deep a little bit into the process, into the hiring
Mm-hmm.
process, and how you sort of started the team. So you talked about there was something I really picked out was the growth mindset. Your first hire who was not sort of like the 5x designer, because that's my new name for a growth designer now. Who is not that 5x designer, but then he talked about him or she having a growth mindset. So what stands out for you, or what are the attributes that you look out for people who will be on a growth team, and talk a little bit about your hiring process that
Mm-hmm.
you think can help people really.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is a great set of different questions. So I will start maybe with this criteria, right? So what are the criteria, or what are the values we are looking for when we are interviewing people for growth in particular? So it's connected, by the way, with this idea of 5x designer, because we have this like assessment criteria, and we are trying to make it also consistent with the broader function. So there we have like attributes connected to product design, connected to data analysis, connected to UX research, to flexibility and adaptability. And we are validating them for all product designers for the company, not just growth. For growth, we are creating additional area, like for example, iterative approach and flexibility and all of these things, not even positioning it as like a growth design experience in particular, because there are a lot of people and candidates who have never been like growth designers, but who had experience of like iterative data informed product design. So these couple of things are more specific for growth that we are looking for. And growth mindset itself, it's like overall it's very big thing, and there is no like probably one question that will help you evaluate if this person has a growth mindset or not. There are many things, like you can ask people about like their mistakes that they made, what kind of learnings they extracted, and even observe how they are answering these questions, not even the quality of their answer or the example itself, but how they react to this type of questions. And over the interviewing process, you can observe if they are curious, if they ask you the questions that you think they should ask. So yeah, and through these many tactics, you can evaluate if this person is enough flexible, enough adaptive, enough resistant to different things that can happen, like changes of priorities, or we need to move in a different direction. So this type of flexibility is something I'm looking for in people. And in terms of the process, how we do that, so for sure, like there is a traditional hiring process, like you have interviews with the team, with yourself. I would say there are a couple of interesting things maybe I would recommend or highlight. First is design critique session. I don't like the word critique, but it's so common. For example, internally, we don't call our design reviews critiques, we call them design jams. So let's call it also design jam with a candidate, and you select one of the products that you both know, and this product might represent, like, for example, product-led growth system or model. It can be, for example, Slack or Loom, and you're together, like, talking about this product and like moving through some flows and discussing these flows, discussing the decisions behind them, trying to unpack why they made that decision, how it can be done even better. So, and this is a pretty valuable evaluation, I would say, if you want to understand if this person can navigate through this growth iterative approach, for example, or hypothesis driven approach, or if they can think of data and assume some things. And this is one of the examples. And second is problem solving exercise. So like I believe we had some time ago, we had test home tasks, but today it's so like difficult to make it scalable because like it just doesn't work. So we switched to problem solving exercise, and it's like a life challenge where you work together like with a designer, and designer is facilitating this discussion. And the key here is not to evaluate just the end result or end solution for the problem, but to see how this designer can collaborate with you. Because designers today are like, I also probably I mentioned it in one of my presentations or talks, that collaboration is a design tool. So today, companies are not looking for people who will work in isolation. They need people who can involve other folks to collaborate and to co-create solutions. So this problem-solving life challenge is a good example how you can evaluate these dynamics.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that your last point really got me because definitely collaboration is a tool for any designer. I can't just imagine how a designer can, yeah, definitely can design something amazing in isolation. Definitely when you collaborate, you have the best results, obviously, because the common saying two heads are better than one, definitely. So I think it's a really great one. And thanks for that, for highlighting those processes. I know it's going to be helpful for a lot of folks out there. So let's look a little bit into the growth team at Miro. So how do you guys function? How does the team work cross-functionally?
Okay, so yeah, maybe I mentioned it or earlier. We have pretty traditional like approach or structure of our growth team, which is based on the funnel. So we have acquisition, activation, engagement, monetization, substreams. And it was like the beginning, like in the very beginning, one team covered all of these things, and then we started building some substreams for that. And when we organized this type of foundation, which is like a growth funnel, we started adding new things. So I will not mention all of them, not to disclose everything, but we started building some other substreams, which we believe are unpacking for us new growth opportunities. One of them was community-led growth, and we created this Miroverse. It was one of my favorite projects. It was my last project before I transitioned to management. And now we have a team that is owning that experience. So Miraverse is basically the community for customers to generate templates and share them publicly. So and yeah, so we have designers dedicated to each particular substream or to each particular team in this funnel. And yeah, so we work collaboratively. Like we have our growth design weeklies where we, for example, do this quiz format for experiments. We have growth design jams during the week where designers are showing their work in progress and we discuss and gather feedback. These are our rituals where we stay connected so everybody knows who is working on what, who to ask questions, and things like that. And then on top of that, we have different stream rituals, like growth stream rituals. For example, all hands, it's my favorite one, once in a month every team is showing what they have done, what are the experiments and learnings, what's next. It's pretty big at this moment. We have maybe 12 or 15 teams already. So it's like a big forum, right? But it's super nice. It's a moment of celebration for the team as well. So they can show, like we also introduce new people there. So it's like super cool format. And apart from that, we also have bi-weekly, I think, feedback sharing sessions where any person from the team can share the results of their sprint, for example, or what they are planning to launch as an experiment. And primarily not product managers or like leaders are presenting stuff there, but people from the team like engineers, data analysts, designers. So this is the opportunity for the team to shine. And I also believe it's about the culture, right? So like we are trying to build this learning culture, this iterative culture, the culture where there is a space to make mistakes and to extract learnings from them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just as if you're still into my book, 'cause that was going to be the next question of the person asked about the culture thing. Like, what would you say is the team culture like that has helped your team to be most productive? I know you just touched on it right now, but if you can just dive a little bit into those, just learning culture and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think in any culture, the foundation is trust, right? So if there is trust, you can do whatever you want with that. On top of that, the space for failure to fail and to learn is also there by default if you have this trust. And I think it took me a while to build this for our growth design team. And another learning that maybe it's super fresh, it's the learning of this week, and I will maybe post something about that on LinkedIn. As designers we receive so much feedback from managers, right? So now I'm a manager and I give my team feedback all the time on these jams, on like one-on-ones. However, how often as a manager do you ask your team to share their feedback about you? And I realized that there is no such a space for that in day to day, right? However, I found space for that on one-on-ones. So we have monthly career one-on-ones, and instead of like probably dedicating it to some work related topics, I asked my team to share feedback with me. And it was so powerful, it's so useful. And I think these dynamics, when you stay, vulnerable even with your team, when you can ask them for feedback, when you can receive that, you can stay humble, you can understand this, and you can maybe share with them some action items and stay committed for some feedback. It's also the foundation of this culture and of these trust relationships. And it takes time. It takes time to build that. And I think right now at Miro we also have that because it took us time. So growth stream is like not super old one, but 5 years is like a good time investment into building something that works today.
Yeah, I think I really like that. And one of the things I also got from here is that feedback that you mentioned, having that feedback mindset. It's sort of the way to really build trust, because not just giving feedbacks to your team members, but allowing them to give you that feedback. And I think it's very, very deep, and it's really going to eat differently for even a team member having the opportunity to really give feedback to is our manager. I think that's absolutely great. What are the metrics that you use to sort of review your team performance as a team or individually? Like, how do you do those performances?
This is, super timely question because our performance review cycle is happening as we speak. So I'm trying to understand that, and also I'm creating this format for career assessment, self-assessment, calibration sessions. So I'm very into that. For the performance itself, I think it's very difficult to come up with quantitative metrics. So I'm not a fan of measuring the success like 5 experiments you launched last month, like, and the ratio of successful or not successful experiments. No, the ratio of successful experiments is like 10%. So like usually around 10% of experiments are successful. If you measure success of the team based on that, so like I don't think it's a healthy metric. However, there are a couple of things. Yeah, there are a couple of things that we are trying to keep in mind. So quality, what that we are trying to define through like some good examples practices on, like, we have career map for visual design, user research, UX design, all of these areas that are kind of aspects of this quality that we are trying to measure qualitatively to evaluate the seniority of the designer. Then there are things like, for example, autonomy or scope. It also depends on the scope, like how we will measure the success and the performance. And there is a thing that we are trying to identify right now, which is, to be honest, super challenging to measure, is velocity. So exactly how fast team is moving, the pace of iterations and things like that. However, I don't have an answer for this right now. If somebody has, please share with me. And in growth, I think we also identified recently like 3 principles that we believe in. And I think it also helps me guide designers and also maybe set up them for success or measure the performance. So the principles are like optimize for fresh learnings. This is exactly like about iterative mindset and the quality of these learnings as well. The second one is think big, start small, iterate smart. This is about the combination and the balance of these big bets, quick wins, and also smart iterations that we shouldn't forget. And third is know your hypothesis, love your data, and move fast, which is just, definition of the growth design. So these are the things that we are keeping in mind. Like, there is no probably the best in class recipe for the performance management or performance review, but you should have for sure like your career map with expectations towards different levels of designers through different assessment criteria. This assessment criteria is basically this 5x representation, like product design, user research, like this and that. And for different levels, there are different expectations. And on top of that, there are different principles, there are different examples of quality and the velocity that you are trying to approach as like bar raiser, for example, and compare people through that.
I think that are really great. In that short answer that you gave, like there's some of value there that I think I will need to go and unpack. There are some of those sinful, will I call it, strategy or mindset that you mentioned. You talked about the think big, start small, iterate smart. Those are really valid sort of mindset I think every designer should have. And also I love the metrics that you sort of mentioned for different levels of expert of designers on your team. And I think those are very useful for managers or product managers out there who wants to really know how to evaluate that thing. Like, so little great. So let's dive a little bit into one of the key levers of growth, talking about onboarding, right? So how important is user onboarding compared to other growth funnels?
This is a great question and I love it. And I'm passionate about user onboarding probably because it was something that we started working on in our first growth team, which was very small 5 years ago. And we like tried to move the needle and improve the user onboarding. And I kid you not, we are still doing that. So onboarding is never done. And why it's so important? Because it's the base. it's the base for your product growth. Everything starts there. So your user is trying to explore the value of your product during the first session. And what is happening? Like the biggest drop is happening right after that. They are not moving forward. So the rest of the team cannot do their job in the best manner if the onboarding team didn't do their job good. So engagement tactics, monetization tactics, all of that doesn't make sense before we think of the user onboarding. And user onboarding, like from the UX perspective, is also super interesting flow to think about, because from one side we are trying to optimize for like activation metrics, so users are diving into the product, start using it, do some actions there. And there is a lot of friction that we need to let our users pass through, like give us this data, give us this information about you, tell us that, tell us this. And it's just a lot for user to process. And how, as a designer, how to convince or motivate or inspire your user to share with you all of this information, and also do some actions after that and feel like, excited about that. We have this like definitions of aha moment, right? So aha moment is the success of this first experience, right? So how to make sure that this first experience leads to aha moment. So there are so many things to do there. And sometimes companies or startups, they are underestimating this area. However, if we do the experimentation, if we do even small quick wins there, the impact of them is dramatic. So if you even like move the needle 1% for this flow, then it can influence your engagement rate. It can influence your monetization rate, because just more people are getting to the product and adopting the product. So I can talk about that for hours. And I think this is super important. And this is why actually we started with my ex-colleague our activity, and like helping teams to unpack their onboarding experience, suggest some improvements based on our experience, because we ran like about 100 experiments, I think, on that journey. And after she left Miro, like she started also advising companies and like worked on the onboarding flows for different companies. So I think it's super cool, and it's just my passion, and I would love to help others if it will be needed.
Yeah, definitely. I sort of like, some of those snippets you dropped there, because you saying it sort of affirm that, because looking at user onboarding, it's sort of the way you feed every other funnel. When you have a broken onboarding, definitely, how do you want to retain? How do you want to make any engagement when users are not coming in? And that's really, really valid. So talking about, different strategies, talking about the PLG, PLS, the product-led growth, and there are also some companies that are sort of working on the product-led sales right now. This question is a little bit tricky. How do these strategies get the best out of the onboarding funnel?
This is a great question. I think for the product led, it's super direct connection, right? So if you start with this like first top of the funnel journey, if you optimize it well, if you understand what are your segments, how you treat them differently with this onboarding experience, then it's, as I mentioned, it's a base for your future product-led growth mechanics like engagement, retention, like monetization tactics. It also gives you a bigger top of the funnel if you have a freemium model. So if more users pass through the onboarding experiences, start using the product, this is just a great user base that you can even start experimenting more and learn faster. So it depends on how many users you have in the product, and speed of your experimentation is dependent on that. For the sales led motion, I think it's different. So from one side, it depends how the product-led growth and the sales model are connected in your business. So for example, there are companies or products that are generating some high quality accounts as hand raisers that then are transitioning to enterprise accounts. And this is a connection between product-led and sales motion. And again, like if these are the accounts, the promising accounts that you are attracting through your sales self-serve, which is product-led, so like just onboarding experience, then engagement, then they are monetizing, then they are creating a bigger account, things like that. So again, the onboarding is still the foundation, so they will not leave the product at this point. So they will continue using that, and at some point they will become a hand raiser that you can generate, that you can transition to enterprise account. If it's the sales motion when you are going to your potential customers like in a high touch manner, so salespeople are approaching clients. So then the onboarding experience is also like not self-serve, it's high touch. So like there is a sales manager or customer success manager who is onboarding the person like through this human experience, and it's absolutely different type of onboarding. However, the mechanics or tactics from the self-serve or vice versa can be relevant or similar. So we need to understand the people motivations, the behavioral principles to nudge them towards some decisions. And this human aspect, by the way, because we know like if it's high touch, it's super expensive, right? You need people who can go to customers, talk to them. However, why it's so expensive and why it's so powerful? Because the human connection, there is probably not so many tactics or design rules or solutions in digital products that can replace this human connection. And in our onboarding experiences, we can also experiment or try to make it more human, right? So I think we can learn from both strategies, exchange different tactics, and make a great user onboarding.
Perfect. Yeah, that's really a great question. And one of the reasons I asked this question because it's really resonating with me right now. I definitely agree with you. So to the next question, I would like to sort of ask like, what are the best practices you've found useful when it comes to user onboarding based on your experience?
Yeah, so not to reveal a lot of things, just to mention a couple maybe. I think first, at some point when you have the opportunity to make it more personalized, it's super powerful. You probably cannot do it right away, but at the moment when you can do it, because more personalized onboarding experience is like absolutely different universe of your results. This is one of the things. Second is probably trying to optimize for the simplicity of this experience, because the most common mistake is like onboarding is super lengthy, is so like there are so many steps, so many questions, and understanding what are the questions you need to ask that strategically will be useful for your business to rely on. So there are questions like, for example, about segmentation. So questions about segmentations are useful. Keep asking them, because based on these questions, you will personalize your onboarding experience. But if there are questions that are random, I don't know, you're just asking them and you are not using this data at all, just remove them. And then trying to optimize for the simplicity and for delightful experience. This is the third thing I would say, delightful experience, because the onboarding is the moment, as I mentioned, when we can, guide users to achieve this aha moment. So I've been to interviews when like users sometimes like they did some action, I don't know, for example, like edit a sticky note, and they uncovered some feature and they was like, oh, wow. And this is an indicator of maybe potential aha moment. And more you observe these actions, you can inform what you need to show your user. You need to show the value, but your maybe now definition of the value is different. You need to go to customers. You need to see where they say these words, aha and wow, and then inform by that your onboarding journey, like include these steps and show users the value first. So this is like, I think, a couple of things, but yeah, this is pretty like high level, and each onboarding is different, and I think we need to treat it also in person.
And absolutely, this has been a very, very fun section for me, and apart from being fun, I've learned a lot, and definitely I'm very sure a lot of people also learn a lot from it. I'm super grateful. 3 questions, just lightning question. If you're not a designer, what profession will you have become? Like, what will you have become if you're not a designer?
I would become a cook, I think. It's my recent passion. I started cooking so much. Breakfast is my favorite type of exercise. And yeah, if you go to my Instagram, it looks like, a food blogger because I have so many pictures of my breakfast, and this is definitely my dream. Yeah.
Yeah. So the next question is, what are the top 3 books you recommend for a growth designer?
Top 3 books. All right. There is a book called Mindset. It's about growth mindset, I think. It was one of the first things I read. So second one can be, let's say, Empowered. Empowered is a very good book by Marty Cagan, and it's like about teams, building teams, and like it's more maybe for managers as well, but for growth teams, the dynamics of the team is also super important, and I would definitely recommend that. So the third one for growth designers can be, I have so many books in my list, like I posted yesterday on Instagram, not Instagram, on LinkedIn, how to read 3 books in parallel. And probably because I read 3 books in parallel, I sometimes forget even what I read. Okay, I think, absolutely. Like for growth designers, one of the most important books is Hooked. It's about the methods, tactics. I remember when I had free time, projects in my work, like, I don't know, just didn't have work for a couple of weeks. It was a long time ago. I was reading this book and it was the best investment of my time. It informed so many decisions. So yeah, these 3.
So the last question is, what are the top 3 products that you love using and you use every time?
I think one, I will not say it's my favorite product from UX perspective. It's just the product that helps me consume the content in a more efficient way, is Audible for audiobooks. The product itself requires some improvement for the business model, and it's not clear how their business model works anyways, but the product is useful for me in particular. Second one would be ClassPass. I think it's available in Europe and in United States. It's for scheduling your training, so you can find out different options, you can choose them, you can schedule. It's also they are using a lot of growth mechanics there, motivational, super variable content. So this is the second one. The third one, I think Duolingo is trying to help me to learn Dutch. Yeah. However, in terms of the product, it's super useful. It's so nice. However, the engagement mechanics are sometimes too much for me, and I would think about how to make it softer for the customer, not to be overwhelmed with these reminders. But overall, these 3 products are top of mind.
Thanks so much, Kate. And finally, for people that would like to reach out to you, what are places where you can be found and you can be reached out to?
Absolutely. So I'm active on LinkedIn. So yeah, I'm more active on LinkedIn. So feel free to reach out to me there. And happy to continue the conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kate, for this time out. And also big thank you to everyone who has taken time to listen to this episode. If you found this very valuable, please do well to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, on any of your favorite podcast app. Also, you can consider giving us some sort of review and leaving some comments on the podcast. See you in the next episode. Thank you.